It took me hundreds of cold calls to find my first freight broker customer, but I landed that customer within my first 2 weeks of being a new broker. It started with just one load of high-end office furniture going from Buffalo, New York to New Jersey, and that one load eventually turned into 3 or 4 loads a month and approximately $10,000 a year in gross profit. But here's the thing. If I had to start over today, I would not prospect the same way. I made some mistakes, I didn't follow up properly, and sometimes I pushed too hard. And I was more focused on transactions than building long-term relationships. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I found my first shipper, how they trusted a brand new broker, and the exact 30-day plan I would use if I had to do it all over again. And it starts with something most new brokers completely overlook. Most new freight brokers think their biggest problem is not knowing what to say on a cold call. But usually the problem starts before that, before they even pick up the phone. They don't know who they should be calling. So they buy a generic lead list, start dialing random numbers, and use some generic sales pitch with every company. Hey, we're a freight broker. We have trucks in your area. We can move your freight. But think about it. How many times do you think that shipper has already heard that exact same pitch? Probably hundreds. If I were starting over, I wouldn't try to sell freight services to everybody. I'd start by choosing a very specific niche. And that's the one thing that helped me land my first customer. When I started my brokerage, I searched online for local manufacturers. I wasn't using some expensive database or fancy sales tool. I was looking for companies near me that actually made and shipped physical products that went in a van. Then I started calling. I don't remember the exact number, but I know I made hundreds of dials. And out of those hundreds of dials, I probably had around 8 or 10 conversations that I would consider potential opportunities. Now, that might sound discouraging, but that's the reality of prospecting. A dial is not the same as a conversation, and a conversation is not the same thing as an opportunity. You have to work through the numbers to find the right company at the right time. One of those companies was a local manufacturer of high-end office furniture, but being local wasn't the only reason why they listened to me. Hey, before I finish this story, what's the biggest thing stopping you from landing your first shipper right now? Is it the leads? Is it cold calls? Is it follow-up? Or is it something else? Share in the comments. I try to read and reply to all of my comments. At the time, we specialized in Northeast dry van freight. That gave us something specific and relevant to talk about. We weren't calling and saying, hey, we move anything anywhere. We understood the region, we understood the equipment, and we were close enough to meet with them face to face. That immediately made the conversation different from the generic freight broker calls they were probably getting every day. Here's the lesson. You don't need to convince a shipper that you can solve every transportation problem they have. You need to show them that you understand one problem that's relevant to their business. That's why defining your niche matters. It gives the prospect a reason to continue the conversation. But getting them on the phone wasn't what won us the business. The turning point happened when we visited their facility. Because the company was local, we arranged a face-to-face meeting. They walked us through their facility and showed us the type of furniture they were manufacturing. This wasn't cheap, mass-produced furniture. This was high-end office furniture that required specialized handling. That facility tour helped us understand what was actually at risk when they shipped a load. Damage wasn't just an inconvenience. It could mean expensive claims, unhappy customers, and major delivery problems. And this is something you can't always learn from a website or a lead list. We weren't just talking about trucks and rates anymore. We were learning about their business and how it operated, what they shipped and what mattered to them. More importantly, we were building trust. After we developed some rapport, I asked some simple questions. And then eventually I asked them if we could quote on one of their upcoming shipments. I wasn't asking for all their freight. I wasn't asking them to replace every carrier or broker they already used. I was asking for one opportunity, one test load. And eventually they gave it to us. The first shipment picked up in Buffalo, New York, and delivered to New Jersey. And it went smoothly. Now, there wasn't some huge emergency, there wasn't a damaged shipment or dramatic truck breakdown. We simply did what we said we were going to do. The load picked up and it delivered on time successfully. That may not sound exciting, but your first load with a customer isn't the time to be exciting, it's the time to be reliable. Because that first load isn't really about how much money you make. Think of it more like an audition for the next load. And in our case, that one opportunity turned into repeat business. We eventually started moving freight for that customer approximately 3 or 4 times a month. Again, not a huge customer. The relationship lasted for several years and generated about $10,000 a year in gross profit. And it all started with one cold call. But I want to be very clear about something. It wasn't one magical cold call script that created that customer. It was the combination of choosing a relevant prospect, understanding our niche, making enough calls, having a real conversation, meeting them face to face and learning about their freight, and asking for one opportunity to prove ourselves. That process worked, but there was also parts of my approach that I would change today and if I were doing it over. When I was starting out, I sometimes pushed too hard. I was focused on revenue. I wanted the load and I wanted it now. That mindset can make you follow up too aggressively or try to move the prospect faster than they're ready to move. But freight broker sales is not just about getting freight, it's about building relationships. The goal of every follow-up should not be, how do I get a load from this guy today? The goal should be, sometimes the better question is, how can I make the next conversation more valuable? Maybe you share a market update. Maybe you ask a better question. Maybe you learn more about one of their shipping lanes. Maybe you simply follow up when you said you would. Pushing harder doesn't create trust. Consistency does. And that's why if I started over, I would use a defined sales cadence instead of following up randomly or only when I was desperate for freight. Okay, so here's exactly what I would do during my first 30 days. Week 1, I would define my niche. That could be based on an industry or a geographic region or a type of freight or equipment or a combination of 2 or more of those things. Then I would research that niche. What do these companies manufacture or distribute? What equipment do they normally use? Where does their freight typically move? What problems are common in that industry? The goal is to sound like someone who understands their business, not just another broker reading from a script. Next, I would build a targeted list of 100 prospects inside that niche, not 100 random companies, 100 companies that fit the specific type of customer I'm trying to serve. I'd identify the companies, the likely decision maker, their contact information, and at least one relevant fact that I could use during my outreach. Your research should give you a reason for calling that company. It's called gathering sales intelligence. Before making calls, I would practice my opening and the most common objections. I would role play with someone or record myself and listen to it. Do I sound confident? Do I sound natural? Am I asking good questions? Or do I sound like every other broker saying, we have trucks in your area? Or worse yet, do I sound like a sales robot? Then I would start contacting the companies on my list. I'd take a consultative approach. I'd ask about their freight lanes, their equipment, the challenges, before trying to sell them anything. Finally, I'd follow up with a defined sales cadence. Every prospect should have a clear next step and follow-up date. I wouldn't call every day and pressure them, but I also wouldn't disappear after one conversation. I'd follow up consistently, add value when possible, and look for an opportunity to quote one shipment. Remember, you don't need all their freight. You need just one load, one chance to prove yourself. Finding your first freight broker customer is probably going to take more calls than you expect. You're going to hear no, you're going to leave voicemails that never get returned, and some days it may feel like nothing's working. But you don't need every shipper to say yes. You need the right prospect to trust you with just one load. My first customer came from hundreds of calls and approximately 10 quality conversations and one face-to-face meeting. 2 weeks later, we were moving our first load. And that one opportunity became worth approximately 10 grand a year in gross profit. Hey, another quick question for you. I really want to know the answer. Which would you rather have? 100 random leads or 25 highly researched prospects? Tell me more in the comments below. Last but not least, if you're already a broker or an agent and you need help landing your first shipper, check out my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. The link is in the description, or you can just go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/FBSA. Now, if you're still researching or deciding if you want to become a broker or an agent, you can check out my Freight Broker Startup Hub. It's a free community to help answer questions and help point you in the right direction. Again, it's free and the link is in the description below. Hey, thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. I'll see you in the next video.